unexplained and intermittent fevers in the fall of 1974 became stomach cramps, vomiting, severe diarrhea, sweats, chills and disorientation by the spring of 1975. One evening, after Marie found Frank wandering aimlessly in the family's yard looking for the car and seeming not to recognise her, she had him admitted to the local hospital. Doctors there believed that Frank was suffering from infectious hepatitis and immediately began treatment. Despite the treatment, Frank would go from hallucinating, not even recognising his own sister at one point, to being lucid and telling her that if something wasn't done, he wouldn't be long for this world. On Sunday, May 25th, 1975, Frank Hilley's premonition proved correct, and he died early that morning. The burial policy he had taken out on himself for $5,000 only months before his untimely death paid for his burial at Forest Lawn Gardens in Anniston. His son Mike, a pastor, presided over the service and funeral. By all appearances, Marie was a grief-stricken widow, but Frank's mother Carrie and his sister Frida had concerns. Frank was one of several people who died in Anniston that day, and his death was considered a tragedy, but not an intentional one, at least not then. Frank had always been considerate and modest with his finances. He made sure that bills were paid on time and wasn't one to want or need the newest and nicest items. He had no idea that Marie had not only run up department store bills all over Anniston, Marie's nausea reared up again, and now Terry had difficulty breathing. Severe vomiting and pains in her abdomen overnight left her delirious by morning. She was so weak and dehydrated by the time she arrived once again at the hospital that she needed intravenous feeding. In all, Terry would be admitted to the hospital 4 different times while living with Marie throughout the summer and fall of 1975 and into the winter of 1975 or 1976. Less than a year after Frank's death, the unexplained fire started. Perhaps coincidentally, the first one happened the night before Mike and Terry were due to move out of Marie's home and into their own apartment. A neighbour spotted smoke coming from the Hilley residence and called the fire department. Mike and Terry were at church, where Terry was preaching a Sunday evening service, and Carol was out with some friends. Neighbours were frantic that Marie's mother Lucille, very often bedridden, was trapped inside the house. As the firefighters were preparing to rush into the house and search for Lucille, Marie drove up with her mother, stating they had gone for a ride. The fire itself had done almost no damage, but the thick smoke was another story. The extensive damage meant that Marie, Carol and Lucille could not stay there, forcing the trio to move with Mike and Terry into their new apartment. The origin of the fire was not determined. Marie blamed it on a heating and air conditioning unit that had been installed by the gas company and filed a lawsuit against them. The case was eventually dismissed. Only a short time later, Marie called the Anniston Police Department to complain of gas fumes, which she said had been present for weeks. An investigation by an officer found no leaks. Marie's next-door neighbour Doris Ford stated around the same time that the gas on her outdoor grill had been turned all the way up and the fumes could be smelled outside. A month later, a fire broke out in Marie's hall closet just before 4 a.m. in the morning. There was no damage, and police found no signs of a break-in. 2 days later, Marie's neighbour Doris Ford returned home to discover there had been a fire in her hall closet that had fortunately burned itself out. As at Marie's house, there was no sign of forced entry and nothing was missing. Marie admitted that she had a key that Doris had given her for emergencies, but she said she had not been in the house and had seen nothing out of the and with her skills, and then something would happen that would cause her to believe that people were turning against her, or she was being hurt in some way, isolating her, and then she would leave. For example, after losing her job with the gas company, Marie told her family that a female co-worker had turned against her and caused the other woman to turn on her as well, leaving Marie's boss no choice but to fire her. Marie also reportedly had a pattern of her professional relationships with her male bosses becoming very personal. During Frank's illness in 1974 or 1975, when he had come home from work early after getting sick, he had found Marie in bed with her boss. Even the police were fair game. Marie had found one of the responding officers to her calls so attentive and attractive that she began to ask for him directly. During one call, in response to a prowler looking in her bedroom window, he and Marie became lovers. Her calls to the police station continued, and he believed many of her complaints were nonsensical ones, used as a pretext to get him to her house. In the latter part of 1978, Marie sold her house in Alabama, and she and Carol moved to Florida to be with Mike and Terry, where they had settled. Marie was a new grandmother, but she was oddly distant from her grandchild.